How's everyone doing? Good? Awesome. Thanks. Well, if you think I'm looking good now, then in 8th grade, just picture what I wore to school, which was a kimono almost every day, stretch pants, and underneath the kimono was a t-shirt with a self-portrait of my face. Now let me tell you what this face looked like. She was an anime character, black hair, bangs, huge eyes with those little air bubbles in them, and I thought that that was me. This is who I am. And I would go wearing these outfits, and I would bring my lunch with me, which was usually vegetable sushi, and I had my own chopsticks. And on the days that I didn't have vegetable sushi, I would still eat things with chopsticks, baby carrots, apple slices, peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. And I would go up to the other kids in my class, and I'd be like, hey guys, guess what? I know Japanese. And then I'd say things like, Tokyo wa yoru no shichiji, which was a phonetic attempt of repeating lyrics from a J-pop song by the band Pizzicato 5. But I was convincing people that I knew Japanese. But in 8th grade, my idea of Japan was pretty much that my grandfather went there every year and he would bring me back souvenirs like the aforementioned kimono and paper fans. But then I discovered something called Hello Kitty and Kuro Kuro Kuropi and Sailor Moon, and I was like, wait a minute, this stuff is Japanese? I don't want to go to Japan, I just want to be Japanese. So every day I went into school adorned in Sailor Moon t-shirts with my chopsticks, and I would gather my friends around and say, guess what guys, I'm Japanese. And I was like half kidding, but also convinced everyone and convinced myself that this was really who I was in middle school. And then I got to high school and I got interested in things like putting out my own music fanzine, and I really wanted to be on Broadway. So I buried my inner Japanese while in high school until it came time to applying for college. And I had to fill out the applications, and I'm looking and there's the dreaded essay, and I'm like scanning the questions, and none of them appealed to me until I saw one, and it said, have you ever had a cultural identity crisis? If so, what was it, and how did it shape who you are and who you want to be? And I'm like, whoa, this just justified my inner Japaneseness in a way that I never thought possible. And so I spilled out all of my thoughts and feelings about this identity that I had. But to top it off, the opening line of my essay came out with a bang. I decided to quote a song. So my essay began, I think I'm turning Japanese, I think I'm turning Japanese, I really think so, The Vapors. And I got into the college that I wanted to go to thanks to this essay. And I was able to pursue my dreams to be on Broadway. And I was actually able to study Japanese in college. In high school, we had Latin, so I was like unenthusiastically saying salve magister, when really I just like wanted to speak Japanese. So in college, I got to study Japanese, and when I graduated, the very first job that I went to be interviewed for was actually an audition to perform at Tokyo Disneyland. I was like, this is my ticket. This is my gateway in. And then I didn't get picked, and I was so bummed. So then the next thing that I auditioned to do was to be in the Japanese tour of Rent. And I didn't get into that either. So then I just continued to study Japanese after work at my boring theater day job. And then I joined the Japan Society of New York, and my apartment was filled with stacks of Japanese fashion magazines, and my Sanrio collection really like expanded beyond belief. And then I thought, you know, I think I'm having a quarter-life crisis. I think I'm having a quarter-life crisis. I really think so. And so then I went to Japan. I moved there. It wasn't that easy. I applied to be an English teacher, and I got in, and I went to Japan, but they sent me to the northernmost part where you had to fly to all things Tokyo and Harajuku, and it snowed where I lived from October to May, and most people that were teaching English there got one school, and I got 25 schools. But it was a great year. I have wonderful memories, wonderful stories. Like I learned how to plant rice in the pouring rain with a group of my school children. I ate grasshoppers in Tokyo at my friend Yosuke's family's restaurant. And I actually got to wear a real, authentic kimono, which was not what I had in middle school. And it took about 30 minutes to put on, and I had 4 handlers. And when I was in it, I realized that I actually couldn't move. And then it made sense for the first time why Japan has 2 types of toilets. They have this like ancient hole in the ground, and then they have this robot toilet that sprays water up at you, because both of those toilets don't involve moving or bending over in a kimono. They were invented for a reason. So for 11 months, I thought that I was 100% Japanese. I had totally acclimated to this land that I was living in. And then in my last month of being there, the G8 summit was actually coming to a town 30 minutes from the town where I lived. So it was George Bush and 7 other world leaders coming to Tokyo, or not Tokyo, coming to Hokkaido where I lived. And it started to get weird. I was walking around, and there are vending machines everywhere in Japan. Like, if you are thirsty, you do not have a problem there every 2 feet. And there's one, and there's this ad on it. It's a cartoon of these like jolly anime police officers, and they don't have guns, they don't have swords, they just have superpowers. And they're battling these like dark, shadowy, evil, amorphous figures with these squinty eyes. And I'm looking at this ad, and I don't know much Japanese at the time in terms of reading it, but I pick up on a couple things. It was an ad for the G8 summit. It had the kanji characters, which are the complicated Japanese characters, for gai kokujin, which is foreign person. And then they had this other word, terurisuto. And they often borrow words from other languages, so I'm looking at it, and I'm like, that says terrorist. And so I take a picture of the ad, and I bring it back to my friend that actually knows how to read Japanese really well, and she explains to me that, yes, this is an ad for the G8 summit, and it's saying that if any Japanese person sees a foreign person, a gaikokujin, these dark, creepy, shadowy figures, that they are a terrorist. And I'm thinking, that's really weird. I don't think anyone would think that of me. I've lived here for a year, and I shrug it off. And then a couple weeks later, I get a knock at the door, and there's like the real-life version of that cartoon police officer man, and he's this little old man in a wool gray suit, and he bows at my door, and he shows me his badge, and he asks me if I speak Japanese. And I say sukoshi, a little bit. But I guess because I said it in Japanese, he thought I knew what I was talking about. So he handed me 2-page explanation of what he was here for. But it was in the most complicated Japanese that I'd ever seen, and I really had the reading level of a first grader. And so we look at each other like awkward, like just saying excuse me over and over. And then he pulls out all of the Japanglish that he knows. And so he says, Samito. And I'm like, okay, the summit. And then he points at me and he says, terrorisuto? Terrorist? And I burst into tears while I'm staring at this man. I'm like, I cannot believe that he is accusing me of being a terrorist when I know how to go to the post office. I know how to navigate their complicated transportation system. Everyone knows my name. Everyone knows what weird shit I eat and buy at the grocery store. And now he is thinking that I am this horrible foreign person. But all of my students told me that I looked like Sailor Moon. So is Sailor Moon a terrorist? I wanted to say that to him, but I was just sobbing, and it made him really uncomfortable, so he bowed all the way backwards out of my door, down to the next house of the next foreign person or terrorist. And so about a week later, I went home, and I went home with about 10 boxes of souvenirs from my life in Japan, and I also came home with a Japanese cat. I actually got my very own Hello Kitty. It was great. And when people asked me how it was, I had to sort of explain to them that even though I had lived there for a year, I never turned Japanese. I was really just a visitor, even if I really thought so. But it's okay, because back to that college essay, how did your cultural identity crisis shape who you were going to be? Well, I later learned, it turns out that the song Turning Japanese by the Vapors is not literally about someone turning Japanese. In fact, it is a horribly racist term for a facial expression that one makes while pleasuring themselves to the point of a happy ending. So the happy ending of my story is that to get into college, I wrote an essay quoting a song about masturbation, and now I am a comedian. So thank you guys, that's my story.